Hey subscribers, I have a special treat for you today. I've created a second podcast called Ideas in STEM Ed in my role as faculty director of the Idea Engineering Student Center at UC San Diego. This show will have interviews with a diverse range of guests with interesting things to say about education in science and engineering. If you like what I'm doing, I'm hoping you'll go over to the Idea Center channel right now and watch this episode there, and also subscribe to the Idea Center channel. If you're listening on the podcast, go ahead and search for Ideas in STEM Ed and listen and subscribe there. If you're not convinced, that's okay. You can stay here and listen to the whole episode, but it's really important to me that the new channels build up some subscribers since we have a lot of exciting stuff that will be going up this academic year. I never ask for any money, and I don't monetize the channel, so if you want to go ahead and pay me back for anything interesting you've ever learned on my channel, go ahead and subscribe to Ideas in STEM Ed and the Idea Center YouTube channel. That said, I hope you enjoy this bonus episode of Ideas in STEM Ed. Ideas in STEM Ed is a production of the Idea Engineering Student Center at UC San Diego, which works to promote community, success, and inclusion at all levels. My name is Darren Lapomi, Professor of Nanoengineering and Chemical Engineering and Faculty Director of the Idea Center. The purpose of this podcast is to provide a forum for the discussion of innovative and inclusive approaches to teaching and mentoring, and to support the personal and academic flourishing and success of students in science and engineering. To learn more about the Idea Center, visit jacobschool.ucsd.edu/idea. Malika Jeffries-EL is a professor of chemistry and materials science and engineering and associate dean of the graduate school at Boston University. She's an organic materials chemist and polymer engineer focusing on organic semiconductors. That is, the type of materials used in organic light-emitting displays, biosensors, solar cells, and other next-generation thin-film devices. She is well known on social media and in the community for her work on equity in academia and in the sciences. I first got to know Malika through her work on conjugated polymers when I was a graduate student, when one name kept appearing in the literature over and over in the papers I was interested in. Her early work on molecular engineering of semiconducting polymers and their combination with nanostructured materials was an inspiration to me during my grad school and postdoc days. She is joining me today to talk about her work, her mentoring, and her new role in university leadership and what she has learned. Malika, thank you very much for joining us on Ideas in STEM Ed.
Darren, thank you for the invitation to be a part of this. I look forward to this conversation.
Excellent. Let's start off scientifically. What scientific topic that you work on in the lab excites you the most right now?
I mean, broadly speaking, what excites me has always been the open-endedness of it, the unlimited possibilities. I mean, when I got started in chemistry, even when I was first curious about chemistry and thinking about, atoms and just their number and the possibility and the different combinations you could make, and what would happen, what would result from that. Now, as I got, better, that was when I was a kid and I saw the periodic table. It's like, you can mix all this together. I became a chemist and I know the rules. And so now that I'm fixated on organic electronics, and just because their properties are so strongly tied to their physical structures, the ability to manipulate atoms and just realize new features, we're keen on making blue light emitting materials right now. That's kind of our jam right now. And so, looking at different combinations, and you speculate, you propose, you even calculate, you draw. But man, when somebody comes in with that NMR and that UV vis and that that data that says this is this compound and it is doing what we anticipated it would, never gets old.
How did you become interested in organic electronics? At what point in your training?
It was actually in the beginning of my graduate school days. And when I started doing my PhD, I was working on high performance materials. And so looking at extremely rigid and fully aromatic systems, but looking at those types of features as it would relate to thermal stability, oxidative stability, and such. At that time, that was when things were really also starting to heat up in the organic semiconductor world. And so, you're sitting there like, making massive amounts of stuff and, doing old school polymer chemistry, large synthesis, mechanical stirrers and pulling fibers and all of that stuff. And it's like, but this is a fully conjugated system. Maybe I can make a thin film and take a UV vis and look into it for some of these other things. And that was in the back of my brain. But the real pivot point for me was Rick McCullough came to visit and gave a talk. And he was in that world. He was really looking at fully aromatic extended pi systems as organic semiconductors, as conductive materials, and wires and transistors and solar, even peeking into that at the time. And so hearing that talk, I concluded that I wanted to do that I finished up my PhD doing the things that we were looking into, but I was like, this is what I want. This is what I want to do. This is what I want my research to be. And I was fortunate enough that Rick hired me as a postdoc. And so I got to learn firsthand from him. And but yeah, he was the salesman that convinced me he led me to the dark side.
And that's how you became interested in polymers too, right? Through organic electronics, or were you a polymer scientist before that?
I was making polymers before that. I was always an organic chemist, and so when I got to graduate school, I had a couple of options. Initially, I was actually going to completely pivot out of organic chemistry and go into forensics. That was my goal initially when I went to get my PhD. I was intrigued by forensic science. I had been talking with the forensics and analytical faculty and had decided that was what I was going to do. But I was doing my rotations and I was just sitting, looking at a mist coming out of a nebulizer and, tracking the distribution of droplet sizes on the screen, thinking, do I want to spend 6 years, 5 years looking at droplets? And, TV really sensationalized like forensic science, like, oh, we got this and we're going to detect this. But at the research, and that's true, and there's a lot of good applications, but at the research scale, what it takes to get to that levels of ultra sensitivity are a lot of mundane. I like bright colors, bright lights. I mean, God bless the people who have that level of focus, but there's a lot of details and repetition at that level, the PhD level, and it didn't speak to me. And I thought, oh no, now what am I going to do? So I said, well, you always liked making things. Let's go back to the organic faculty. So I started talking to the organic faculty, and the two options that presented themselves was to join a total synthesis group, which definitely was intriguing. What took me kind of out about organic total synthesis was listening to the people who were in it. And I mean, each new bond formation was like a victory. But when you got to the end, and it's like, you only have, when you're rotovapping down your NMR solvent, because that's just how little material you have left to get it all back. And and you're doing when you do all your characterizations and find out you have the wrong enantiomer, it's just like, oh, I was like, I don't know if I could do that. And then there was a new person who was doing polymers, and so then I joined his lab because it had the synthesis that I was interested in. It had the molecular element that I was interested in. I mean, I said I switched fields to go into the semiconductors, but making bulk polymer is kind of fun. I mean, making like large vats of polymer is actually very fun. And spinning fibers and Ubalo viscometry measurements and stuff. So that was my foray. Other than that, I had only done some, undergraduate research, just regular organic synthesis. But then I dipped into polymers and did that, and then shifted into organic semiconductors.
I appreciate your description of bulk polymers and bulk materials in general. I remember when I was doing my grad school visitations, I showed up to one of my one-on-one meetings, and the PI said that, we make grams of stuff. So, chemistry to differentiate it from total synthesis, where you might rotovap down that NMR tube, and then what's left over is like a few milligrams and half of its vacuum grease anyway.
a few milligrams. It's mostly grease, and it's definitely the wrong isomer. So I just realized that wasn't for me, and so I was good with doing the organic, the high polymer stuff. That was interesting and fun, but it got much better when I went to the semiconductors. Then I realized I found my people. That was my place.
Mm-hmm. Were you a chemistry major all through undergraduate?
I knew I was going to be a chemistry major. I came in, even though I went to a liberal arts institution, I loved chemistry. I was always so curious about it. But then when I got to a liberal arts school, I thought, oh, well, what else can you learn? What else can you take and do? And so I took advantage of that, and I did a double major. So I was actually an Africana Studies chemistry double major. So that's not the typical combination that you see, but it spoke to me. I got a chance to really do things that I was interested in. We had just gotten a huge amount of money the university did for a museum, and I thought, I want to take classes in that building. So I'm like taking classes in African American art and history and things. I was like, I want to work in some of these other spaces. And I took advantage of my liberal arts education in that way. But chemistry was always my baby.
Have you ever found that your interest in the humanities, particularly your double major, has ever informed any of your research or teaching choices?
A little bit, absolutely, a little bit. Not so much in my research. I tell you where it comes into handy has actually been on the administrative side, or just even. So I was in a position where we recently started an African and Africana Studies program here at BU, and we have a director, and now they're looking to expand and add a doctoral program. And the guy comes to talk to me about everything and the benefits, and it's like, you don't have to sell me. I was actually he's trying to sell me on the importance of Africana Studies as a discipline. I was like, oh, I was a major in college, and he was like, I thought you were a chemist. I'm that too. So it's fun when you've got your dean is a random chemist, but she can actually sit on your faculty search committee for Africana Studies. So
yeah, that's wonderful. So what led to your interest in campus leadership?
I feel like it was kind of leading there without me knowing it, and then I thought, oh well, yeah, maybe I should do this. I've always throughout my career, I say probably lived a yeoman's life in terms of just doing a lot of service in terms of changing the landscape, coming into science and coming into higher ed. I mean, I'm a first generation kid, and so completely different perspective. And I look back at my own trajectory and how I made it to where I am, and it was like, minefield, just pitfalls and all kinds of things. And it's like, there really should be a guide or some, it shouldn't be this hard for people who have the intent and desire, even if they don't have the social capital and, and resources. And so that's always kind of been a passion project of me to think about how do we knock down barriers? How do we create opportunities? And I've been very active over the years with the American Chemical Society doing things like that. And I've always enjoyed that work. And so it occurred to me, only recently I said, when the opportunity was advertised for this post, I read what the requirements of the job was, and I thought, this would actually make some of the things that I'm doing outside of my job that I'm very passionate about my job. And that was what was it for me. I mean, I had always been doing a lot of stuff for diversity, a lot of stuff for recruitment. I was previously the program director in the graduate program in chemistry here at BU. And it was like, I can take all this stuff that I do that's not my, that's on top of teaching and on top of research, and actually make it my job. And so now I'm dealing with student troubles, I'm dealing with access, I'm dealing with recruitment, I'm dealing with retention. And so I do all those things, and now that's my job. And so now some of the other things are peeled back a little bit so I can actually, not drive myself crazy. And so it's nice.
What initiatives are you most excited about in your new role?
So, like the things that are already announced and things that aren't announced. So, okay, there's lots of initiative. There's lots to be excited about in my new role. And so, of course, you go through the growing. I mean, coming into this, I came into this position in 2020. So coming into a new administrative role during a pandemic, in the beginning, it was really just like treading water. You're just trying to keep afloat everything that's happening, lots of variability. But, honestly, the pandemic was eye-opening for many ways because it exposed a lot of flaws in the system. And I think a lot of people were rolling with the status quo, like, this is how we've always done things, and this is how we'll do it. And then you start to see a lot of things were falling apart and they weren't working. And so, one thing, we had several programs here that weren't really diverse. And people say, we get good students and, things are fine. We have lots of students and they're good. We don't need to change our recruitment. And I was like, but they're not very diverse. But it's fine. Okay, well, then when you realize that 70% of your students are coming from another country and our borders closed, now you're like, oh God, we should have developed a new strategy to try to recruit domestically. And, maybe the dean was right. We should have tapped that pipeline of underserved students to get to this end. And so, the barriers are coming down a little bit. I mean, of course, I'm pushing a little bit on diversity. We don't have a lot of diversity in most of our programs here. And so, encouraging faculty to recruit more. It's a multi-pronged problem. It's not everyone looks at who comes in, but it goes beyond that. You can't admit whoever you don't recruit. So, but the two things I would say in terms of initiatives that I'm really excited about, one has been formally announced, and the other one is on its way to being announced, is that we, I guess like 3 initiatives. Actually, we had some generosity in terms of an estate gift that allowed us to start a new fellowships, and there's actually 2 fellowships that are coming soon. So that's always nice. You can get internal competitive grants and opportunities for your students. The other thing that's coming down the pike is we're starting a Society of Scholars postdoctoral fellowship program. So that's going to be joint between the college and operated by the graduate school. And so it's going to be an opportunity to come to BU. It's open to any discipline, and we're looking at people who want to come and not just do a traditional postdoc, like, be siloed, be in your group. We actually want to be part of a campus community. And so there'll be activities with all the scholars, regardless of their disciplines, and professional development and training, aside from along with them doing the traditional postdoctoral stuff. So I'm really excited about the type of people we can bring.
Yeah, an often neglected group too, postdocs. Yeah.
Oh, well, and that's actually kind of why we went through that, because postdoc is the great unknown. Like, you talk to most schools and they have a plan. Like, how do you diversify undergraduates? How do you, diversify graduate school? But postdocs, like, well, the PIs have the money and they hire whoever they want to hire, right? And so everyone doesn't really have equal access to good postdocs. And so, quick plug, this is actually nice. And this postdoc, I think the salary is going to be like $65,000 a year. Plus relocation. So that's exciting, and it's open to all disciplines, and we're going to have a steady state. I forgot the final number, but we'll be hiring multiples each year, so there'll be a steady state, and you can stay for more than 1 year. And, it's designed for people who want an academic job. So that's coming out. That announcement's going live soon, the Society of Fellows. And the other thing I'm excited about is that I'll be launching a relocation assistance program for incoming students. And so acknowledging that, first generation students, by hook or by crook, they get through the undergraduate. And a lot of these undergraduate institutions do a wonderful job at supporting these students during their time. But that next step, getting out of school and getting into graduate school, can be expensive in a way a lot of people don't realize. Rent these, you live in a big city, these housing things, it's just, housing is a problem. They want first months, last months, brokers fees, things like that. It's a lot for students to deal with, and a lot for students to manage. A lot of questions we do get from students is, they get the admissions letter, they know they're getting a stipend. The number one question they have is, when do I even get my first check, right? Because sometimes you're even 30 days beyond when you get paid. And so we're going to set up a program whereby incoming students can actually get money to help them get to Boston and get situated and get set up so they can begin their studies. And so I'm hopeful that by removing that barrier, we can encourage a lot of first-gen students to take that leap and continue on with their PhD.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I know a little bit about the housing situation in Boston. Actually, I did my whole undergraduate training, I think, in the building where you have where you're sitting right now.
I'm in the dean's office now, but we're.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was at BU in the Mallinckrodt, or I'm sorry, not Mallinckrodt. It starts with an M. Metcalf, the Metcalf.
Oh, you were at Metcalf. Yeah, I was trying to figure out if we had moved. So if we had moved into the other building at the time. So you were in Metcalf. So yeah, I was briefly over there. So now I'm in the life sciences building.
Yep, I learned.
Nicer than Metcalf.
Yeah, definitely. Though I learned everything I know about chemistry, 90% of what I know from in Sci 107, the lecture hall.
Good times.
So when you were considering a position in a university leadership, what I have found now, having one foot in student affairs and our student success office in the engineering school, is that some of my colleagues kind of poo-poo it, and they say that, like, your research is going to suffer, and you're gonna do good work in that leadership role or that administrative role, but whoever remembers, who's doing that work anyway, are you going to get the credit for it? I wonder if you had like pro-sayers and naysayers when you were making this decision, and how did you negotiate that?
Absolutely. I mean, in various levels, from people who actually do have your best interests at mind, like how are you going to balance or what are you going to do, and to people who just want to, say things. But honestly, what I say is that I think it depends upon what you want. This is your career. You have to do what you want with your life and your career. I'm doing what I want in my life, my career. Arguably, if I peeled back all of the other things I did, put my head down, went 100% in and focused more on research, I would be more productive as a researcher. Absolutely. But you have to think about what is it that you want for your career, the legacy you make. And I feel like, I don't know. I think the world is just going to be fine, if my H factor doesn't go up another couple of notches. I don't know. I just feel like it's just going to be okay. That's not really going to be the thing that's going to define or change the world. That for me, I feel like the impact I'm going to make is in the training of students and giving other people a chance and watching them succeed and soar. And so I think it just depends on what you want to be. People say things like that, like, oh, they always forget the administrator, or you don't matter, you don't make a difference. But, I don't think so. And often you can even run data. I mean, I was looking at data, just looking at chemistry departments, and what they had done over the years in terms of increasing diversity as it related to underrepresented minorities, and even going further back as it relates to women. And you see some of the departments that have the best numbers, and almost every instance you can look at and say, LSU's at the top of the list. That was Isaiah Warner. Oh, Purdue, they had a good run. That was Joe Franz. Like, you could point to that person who made the difference. And then if you extrapolate it further out and look at what those people they put into the world went on to do. So I don't think so. I think you have to figure out what you want your legacy to be. If you want to build, if you want to live your life such that you're, stacking up your citations and waiting, every October for that phone call from Stockholm, then that's your choice to be made. But, for me, it's when you get those email updates from the student that said, hey, I remember when, you advised me to do this, or you really helped me out. I just want to let you know I got a great new job. Or, when my students send me updates from grad all down to undergrad, people I've interacted with. And, when you get those updates and say, I stepped in, I helped out, and I made a difference in this person's life, and they're going into the world and now they're making a difference. That's just the choice that I made, and I don't know. I kind of fancy myself the ultimate B-lister. I do okay. I mean, I don't, I laugh. I say I'm probably not going to get into the National Academy of Science, but that's okay. I'm still the people's choice. Like that's I do it for the people.
I love that answer, Malika. And in fact, I even kind of object to the word like administration or administrator. To me, the people that do those jobs are actually exercising just a different kind of creativity, that, creative problem solving for the purpose of helping people directly, right? And it's not, people think they're paper pushing jobs. And they're I think we really have to think carefully about the messaging we send us in the academy, because we're told, anyone who's goes through the tenure track hears, it's research, teaching, and service, and it's kind of like not an evenly distributed pie. It's like you're really going to get judged on your research, somewhat on your teaching, and don't have no service. And that people who actually do a little bit more of the others, they give you very negative. Oh, they couldn't cut it as a researcher, or they this, or and it's like, if everyone adopted this mentality that all these other things were not important, the university couldn't function. It literally couldn't function, but for individuals who do actually put in efforts in these thankless roles in some cases. And so I think we need to normalize that some people are going to demonstrate excellence in other key functions of the academy that aren't just research based, and that's okay. We need all. I mean, if everyone just I see this in some departments. You have like a committee and no one wants to be on it, or you get no volunteers, and it's like, wow, we need all kinds. I have to ask though, do you laugh at the Twitter account, the Associate Deans? Because I do.
That is, oh my God! I'm like, associate deans. Who? I mean, we almost need to we need somebody to do some serious doxing and figure out who is associate dean. I think it's a collective. Like, it can't, one person can't be on it that well, but it's so. You know what they say? Truth is stranger than fiction. Like, the truth hurts. It is so spot on. And I always thought it was funny. And then when I became an associate dean, it was just kind of like, it's funny, not funny. Like, it's not. When you're an associate dean is a difficult job. People, people who don't know will be on the outside looking in will say things kind of like, oh, they weren't good enough to be a dean, they're associate dean. But it's like, ooh, and department heads too. It's a different job. The level of pinching, when the lower you're at the bottom, you're getting, disrespected from the bottom up and pressed from the top down. It's a very difficult job. So.
How do you manage your time between teaching, research, and now your new role?
So, all along I was doing research, teaching, and service, and I was doing a good job balancing those things. And I said, you have to realize how much bandwidth you have. And so when I took this administration on, I was like, I cannot do all things excellent. And so I am on hiatus from teaching right now. I said I can take on this administration, but I cannot take on this administration and teach and do research. And so I am on hiatus from teaching right now was one of the things in taking on this role. And it makes sense because the number of hours I'm spending in this, there's just no way I could do teaching on top of it. And teaching itself is not hard, especially at this stage when you've done it a lot. We've done it several times. However, what is part is the variability, is the human factor. Do I have time to go into a classroom twice a week and teach a class? Sure. Write a few exams, hold some office hours. Could probably squeeze that in. Do I have time to answer all those student emails on top of all my administrative emails? Literally, the emails is what will kill you. I know I do not have time to deal with the student emails on top of the administrative emails. And it's also just a variability. When you try to set things up and be nice and structured, like, oh, if I can do this and this time and this time, maybe I can make it work. Students don't care about that. They will violate. They'll be like, but no, I want to meet at this time. Okay, but this is my administrative time. Well, I can't come another time. Or I'll just show up in your office with my backpack and sit down and start talking to you when you're trying to finish a proposal by 4 p.m.
There's a recent phenomenon I've noticed where because the pandemic has normalized like professors lecturing probably in their PJ pants, and they're always at home anyway, so I'm going to ask if they can meet with me on Saturday and Sunday. I've gotten questions like that.
No, you have to put up boundaries, and it was very easy to slip into that because you're working from home. And I told myself, well, I'm willing to add back in the time that I was spending commuting because now I don't have to commute back and forth and such, but you just got to put a hard stop, oh no, I'm like, it's just 6:15, like close the computer and walk away, because you'll just keep going. And, if I really feel pressed or stressed to do something, I might pick it back up after dinner and do a few more emails. But to just shut it down, I try to get, at least a couple of times a week, get a workout in. It's easier when you're working from home because you already had on workout bottoms to begin. So it's easier to just go upstairs and put on your sneakers and work out. But I try to at least carve off some time for myself, because work will expand into the space you give it. I don't know where that puts it in terms of its density. Probably like right above argon, maybe between argon and xenon. It just fills and it expands and sits. It's definitely not like nitrogen. It doesn't rise up. It just takes the space and it will sit in it. And you just have to put some real boundaries up.
What aspects of pandemic work would you like to retain once things are mostly back to normal? So I take it that your teaching load was reduced right around the start of the pandemic.
I taught in the spring. I taught the entire spring semester. So we pivoted to virtual. I was teaching class. So I picked up the AD thing over the summer. I started in July. So I did teach that semester virtually. Mm-hmm. What I would like to keep, what I think we should keep is, I don't think we should totally discount the role of virtual meetings and also the role of virtual classes. For people who work at in-person schools, that we did it out of necessity, whereas some schools obviously always had an online component. And I know most in-person schools were like, we're in person, we're not going to do, and virtual is out of necessity and we won't do that anymore. But especially coming from the graduate side of the house, when I think about our professional programs, I do think that hybrid education has a real part to play in access. The ability to not always come to campus works very well for anyone who is a full-time working professional. And so I do think that especially for us, like looking at our master's programs, that we need to think about how we can try to capture some of the hybrid element going forward, because it is an access issue. I was talking to a student and he was just like, yeah. He's like, I was sad to see you guys went back to in person. Last year was so awesome because I have a job and I have kids and I'm doing this master's degree, and not, that complexity of just trying to go to campus and back. That was just like one less thing. But at the same time, the advantage of going to a brick and mortar school versus an online is the community, is the networking and meeting people. So that's why I'm a huge fan of hybrid. Come to class, come to school once a week for one class and jump online, for the other one, or twice a week or whatever. But I think like giving people flexible options so that they can work around jobs if they need to. And again, these are master's students, PhD students with jobs. It's like heresy, but work around families, and things like that, I think are beneficial. So I think we should hold on to some of that.
Have you noticed an uptick in incidents of depression and anxiety among students during COVID, and how have you managed those situations?
It's definitely been a sharp uptick. My predecessor had been lobbying for an additional staff member just on the student services side, and I doubled back down on that and made the case, and we're now hiring somebody to say, look, the number of students in crisis is steadily increasing and we need more. We need, hey, wouldn't it be nice if we had somebody else in this office to manage it? Because by the time it comes to me as a dean, they're coming to talk to me because it's gone all the way wrong. And it's like, maybe if we could actually have somebody who could help students when they're in minor crisis, we could stop it from becoming major crisis, and maybe we could be preventative instead of reactive. And so those are the things. It starts even with the messaging to the students, reminding themselves of self-care and the importance of taking care of yourself and the resources that we do have available, and just even fun things to do beyond work, and just encouraging people to take care of themselves and build a community. We did a lot to try to create a virtual community because isolation was problematic and triggering for a lot of people. I was talking to a friend of mine, and she actually made a post on Facebook when at the height of the pandemic, when they were finally, doing some travel was happening. It was around Thanksgiving last year, and she said, people are so stupid and selfish. It's the middle of a pandemic. You shouldn't be traveling and spreading diseases. And anyone who is traveling for the holidays is selfish. And, that was kind of the gist of her post. And people were kind of like, yeah, they don't understand how important it is. Stay home, isolate, quarantine. And everyone's like, yeah. And I commented and I said, I'm sorry. You all are you posted this, and I know you're married with 3 children, and I don't know the rest of you, but I think you're the same. Selfish? No. Realistic. I said, do you realize that people who are single stayed at home by themselves for 8 months? I said, yeah, so no, that's not selfish. That's saving yourself, actually. I said, don't judge people who are traveling for the holidays. People have been living in significant isolation, and so a lot of students who couldn't travel, and people from other countries, they were given the advice not to leave. They may not be able to get back in, and it was stressful, so stressful for a lot of our students. And, we just tried to check in and provide supports, provide people with resources, create fun activities and things like that to try to keep morale up despite the circumstances. So
yeah, and there's so much there is so much sanctimony, I think, coming from certain quarters about COVID and pandemic shaming. There were many people up in arms about in-person teaching this year because, the Delta wave was coming. But meanwhile, the custodial staff on campus have been working the entire time. The people working in retail jobs and construction were working the entire time. And, we now, almost everybody working at a university is vaccinated, and now there's a small sacrifice required upon us to make to bring things back closer to normal. So if there's one strain of comment on.
No, I feel the same way. I mean, yeah. I got bombarded. We announced that we were going back to in-person instruction. some graduate students decided to do like a letter writing campaign, and they all kind of had the same talking points, and they emailed all the upper level administrators, shame on you, we should be remote, and I shouldn't have to choose between my life and my livelihood, was the standard sentence. And I replied back and I said it's interesting take that you all are been working from home safely throughout all of this, but probably faithfully going to the supermarket or even using Instacart to get what you need. And at the end of this 5 years, you'll have a PhD and a great new job. But that person who's been ringing you up throughout this entire pandemic will probably not have much more than that. Like check your entitlement and privilege, and if you really don't want to come back, you can always have you can take a leave of absence and sit this one out if you prefer, but don't, because the flip side of it is, if we had continued remote, I mean, it was, universities took tremendous financial hits. They generate their revenue from tuition and being in person, and some people thought that was callous and calculating. Oh, they want us back just to make their revenue. They want us back to save our collective butts. Like, everybody will get fired. Like, you do know if this thing goes belly up, we all lose our jobs. Yeah. People didn't even consider when things were closed, the food service workers, and people who worked anything in hospitality. Here in Kenmore Square, so many restaurants went out of business. All these people lost their jobs, and so reopening the campus saved a lot of jobs, and a lot of entry level jobs for the people who needed their jobs the most. So.
Have you noticed a difference in the types of mental health issues faced by undergraduates versus graduate students, and the origin of those problems?
Well, one thing I do notice is, and I was actually having lunch with a friend and we were joking about this, is the preponderance of graduate students who don't seem to know how to function as an adult. And I think that what happened is, when they had problems when they were younger, someone else who took care of them. And now, they're at the graduate level, and some of the things that present, and it's like what? Like, where's your role in this? Like, where's your accountability in this? And it's actually just startling. And so I think, mental health issues they're prevalent in either side. But I guess to me, it's more of the shocking part of how many people let something just go so entirely wrong before they ever bother to say anything. That's the part that's shocking to me. It's like, am I surprised that students have issues? No. But I am surprised at the lengths it has to go before somebody will finally take action. And even often the action is that they having parents and things call, even in graduate school. And you're like, that to me is surprising, and I don't know how bad. I don't know if they also did that at the undergraduate level, and I know they definitely did that at high school, and other people kind of magically swoop in. But yeah, it's really surprising to me how bad things will get before somebody will say something at the graduate level. It's just very surprising.
And also managing potentially toxic relationships with PIs is something that graduate students tend to face. Do those problems bubble up to your office?
Yes, that's what we're here for. We have to deal with various iterations of that, and of course, the pandemic. I think there are two groups of people. Some people tempered their expectations in the face of all that was going wrong, and some people kind of doubled down. You hear statements like, I know everything was closed for 100 days, but that's the but. Like, everything was, but we have PIs who are we had PIs who were trying to get students to sneak into the labs and work when we were supposed to be shut down. And it's like, come on, and the students, they're like stuck between a rock and a hard place. They don't want to say anything but they don't want to they don't feel comfortable coming into work. There's a reason everything is shut down, and they don't want to say anything and get people in trouble. And it's like, okay, I think it's easy. I'll just say the custodial staff snitched. Say, I've told that your lab is occupied and running, and the building's supposed to be closed. Please explain.
Yeah, and amazingly, half of university labs were apparently working on antiviral research in order to circumvent occupancy limits.
Oh, you heard about that, right?
Yeah.
Yes. That was like, what is up with that? People were saying that, like, oh, we're doing COVID research. We're doing COVID research. I'm like, why can't you just be like normal people and write a review paper and do some calculations? That's what we did.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, just like, all right, let's crunch some numbers. Let's get caught up. Let's rewrote our SOPs. Let's do all this stuff, this nonsense stuff that we don't have time to do, that just kind of just keeps getting pushed down because everyone's trying to do the wet work. It's like, let's do some housekeeping. And it did, it took a hit, but again, tempering your expectations. We took a hit. We lost a lot of time in the lab, but I wasn't going to compromise the safety of my students for the sake of getting a few more experiments out. Like, oh my God.
Mm-hmm. What does imposter syndrome mean to you, and have you ever experienced it?
So when I think about imposter syndrome, it's the feeling that you don't really belong where you are. And I have experienced it at various stages. But I've also managed to push forward. So I feel like the bigger the forum, and you kind of like look around, it's like, like maybe I'm not supposed to be here. And so you just kind of have to reconcile that with yourself and just kind of take a minute and just like, let me just sit for a second and think beyond the superficial. Because you might go someplace. For me, traveling in this scientific space as a woman, as a Black woman in a field where there aren't very many, and you find yourself in these situations and you look around and it's like, okay, it's this guy, and me. And then you're like, okay, maybe I shouldn't be here. And then it's like, but you are here. You didn't crash. You were asked to be here, which means you're supposed to be here. And then you just take a step back. Now, why might they ask you to be here? And, 9 times out of 10, it's because you surround yourself with people who actually value the importance of different perspectives and different information, But I get that. And, sometimes you can perpetuate imposter syndrome on yourself, and sometimes other people perpetuate it. Why was she asked to keynote? Or, how come she was invited and not me? Or, and sometimes people will perpetuate that onto you. But I've learned over the years not to pick up other people's baggage. So I'm like, well, I kind of know why people invite. I kind of could surmise why I may have been asked to speak on this occasion, and I'm just gonna sit in that. So.
Mm-hmm. In what circumstances do you feel like an insider?
In what circumstances do I feel like? I like that question. I haven't had it before. Do I feel like an insider? I almost always feel at home, or I feel like an insider whenever the metrics aren't just technical. So I guess when you operate in the science space, and again, when everyone's got this measuring stick of, how big is your lab and papers you publish, yada, yada, yada. And you're like, okay, we're going to do that game. But when it's really just about the work at hand, like, what are we doing? Like, we're here to work, how we're going to get things done. I feel right at home because I know what I bring to the table. I know what I can and can't do. And I roll up my sleeves and settle right in.
That's great. And I think in the field that you and I work, it's like we're outsiders scientifically to our departments, but we're very much insiders to our scientific community. So when I started my faculty position, Quinn Wynn, she told me that as a researcher in organic electronics, you'll never have a home because you're not quite a physicist, not quite a material scientist, not quite an electrical engineer. Right. And especially if you work on polymers, small molecule people don't believe what you're doing is actually chemistry because of a little thing called polydispersity. But the same person, Quinn, also told me that, but the community, the international and community in the U.S. of organic electronics researchers is inordinately nice and welcoming to individuals across science. Have you found that to be true?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you just summarized. I'm like, I feel seen. But yeah, like when I hang out with the FPI ISNA crowd, I'm like, I'm home. These are my people. Yeah, I feel like Actually, although I've been fairly welcomed I've been fairly welcomed in the organic division as it relates. I was involved in stuff with ACS at the higher up levels, but I know some other people like, is she really an organic? They're not going to give me a COPE award or nothing. Like, is she really an organic chemist? And everything else you said about the whole physics and MSc crowd. But yeah, when I get around amongst everybody else, those are my people. FPI, ISNA, ICSM, I show up at those places and it's like, I feel home.
And I feel like, there's a new book on scientific philosophy. It's the Knowledge Machine by Michael Strevens that says that scientific research really progresses by conflict and competition and partisanship. And I think I'm just sitting there shaking my head no, because in certain fields, you don't have that. But I think what the author is thinking of is 100 years ago, you would have Wilberforce and Thomas Henry Huxley debating the origin of species or something, and they would be up in these podiums shouting at each other what you're saying is rubbish, sir. But I just have the feeling that it's very field dependent.
Absolutely. But it's interesting. I don't think we use our podiums, but where you see that is the internet, right? I mean, you have between things like, Retraction Watch and even I don't do the archives or, but I know people can comment on work and stuff that's posted there. So there is kind of these discourses that happen. But people are more civil. That's what I miss about in-person conferences is kind of that, that coffee afterwards, okay, but had you ever thought about this or, something to consider? And, I feel like it's a different approach. I know some people thrive on that level of toxicity, but there are ways to comment and correct people that don't have to be aggressive and toxic. And some people have mastered it, and some people thrive on just being as evil as possible. But I don't really necessarily respect the second thing. It's you could be critical of work and still be kind.
That is fantastic, and also a fantastic place to wrap up. Is there anything that you wish we had followed up on that we didn't?
No, this was been a great little nice twisty turny conversation. I had no idea where we were heading, but I think we've covered the essence of it. I'm a chemist. I make molecules. I tweet about it.
And where can people learn more about you?
Well, you can learn more. You can learn a lot more about me. I have my departmental website. You can learn about our group and what we've got going on at, it's very simple, it's sites.bu.edu/L. And if you want to learn more about the group and some of the science that's going on there, and if you want to learn more about me, you could see a lot of the media and all the other crazy things that I've been involved in outside of the classroom at chemdiva.com.
Awesome. Malika, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today.
My pleasure, Darren. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to Ideas in STEM Ed, a production of the Idea Engineering Student Center in the Jacobs School of Engineering at UC San Diego. This episode was edited and engineered by Sky Lee, with theme music written and performed by John Viviani. Title art was created by Caitlin Wong. Special thanks to Sarah Eckert for guest booking and marketing. The Idea Center works to promote community, success, and inclusion at all levels. To reach us for guest suggestions and other feedback, please send an email to ideadirector@eng.ucsd.edu. And to learn more about our programs, visit jacobschool.ucsd.edu/idea. As a final note, the views expressed by me or the guests do not necessarily reflect those of the Idea Center, the Jacobs School of Engineering, or UC San Diego. See you next time.